I'm going to tell you something that nobody around you is going to say. If you're in your 30s, maybe your late 20s, and you have less than $10,000 saved, you are behind. And you already know that. And you've known it for a while. You just haven't had anyone say it to your face. Here's what nobody talks about when they talk about being broke. It's rarely actually about money. Most people who are behind financially aren't behind because they had bad luck. They're behind because of how they've been moving through life. They're telling themselves, hey, they'll get serious next month, maybe next year, once things calm down or once the timing is right. And the timing is never right because that's just how this works. The people who are behind at 35 were telling themselves the same thing at 28. And what that really is just being uncomfortable with how much effort real change takes. And rather than face that fact, you start delaying it. And I don't say that to attack you. I say it because I was exactly that person. I know what that feeling is like, where you're smart enough to see the problem, but not yet disciplined enough to actually do something about it. Where life feels like it's moving around you while you're just standing still. That's the real problem, not the number in your bank account. The number is just the scoreboard. The actual problem is the decisions and habits that produce that number. And until you look at those honestly, the numbers don't change. So let's actually do this for a second. Let's look at where you are right now. I want you to actually think about this because you have less than $10,000 saved. So what does your day actually look like? Are you waking up with a plan, or are you just waking up and just reacting to whatever goes on around you, whatever your day throws at you? Are you spending money on things that feel necessary in the moment, but that, if you're being honest, you're just kind of wasting your money, like subscriptions you don't use or eating out when you shouldn't, spending on things that feel like progress but aren't really progress? Are you working on anything that is actually moving your life forward? Or are you just staying busy and calling it productivity? Because there's a big difference between being busy and making progress. And here's the harder question to answer. If someone looked at your last 90 days, your habits, your spending, your efforts, your focus, where your focus has been, would they see someone who is serious about changing their situation? Or would they see someone who is just waiting for something to change on its own? That's the inventory that you need to do on yourself, not your bank account. You need to do an inventory on your own behavior because your behavior is the only thing that you actually control. And right now, if you're being honest with yourself, there are probably 2 or 3 things that you already know you need to change. And you don't need another course to figure that out. Let me tell you where I was many years ago. I had been working in customer service and sales. I had a decent job. The paycheck was relatively steady, but I hated it. And I felt like I was capable of more, and I wasn't doing anything about it. So I made a decision. I quit. And I told myself I was going to build something. I was going to make websites. I was going to sell some products online or start an e-commerce store, figure out this whole digital online business thing. And I had this vision in my head of what my life was going to look like. And then 6 months later, reality hit. Nothing kind of worked that I was working on. I tried a bunch of different things. I put in the hours that were required. I watched the tutorials. I set up the pages, the emails, the funnels, but the results just weren't coming. And so weeks turned into months, and slowly that excitement that I had when I first quit, that energy started to drain out. I started waking up without a clear reason to get up, without a clear reason to move, and the days started to just kind of blend together. And in the background of all of this, the bills were just still kind of racking up. And so every month, I still have to pay rent. I still have to pay for the phone bill, for food, support my parents. And so I was just sitting there with a laptop, a half-built kind of website, online thing, and a bank account that was just going in the wrong direction. And that feeling is really hard to describe if you haven't been there. It's not just stress. It's this specific kind of heaviness where you start questioning whether you actually have what it takes to be successful, to do this thing, or to just make it in life. Whether the version of yourself that you believed in was even real, someone that could actually do the thing that you set out to do. And I remember one particular afternoon, I was sitting at my desk staring at my screen, and I just felt completely stuck, like I had run out of time or something. And I had 2 choices in that moment. I could keep going the way that I was going, getting more desperate, making more worse financial decisions, panicking, watching things get tighter, or I could just do something that I hadn't done. I could get honest with myself, not about the business, not about the money, but just about myself and who I was becoming, or how I was acting. And when I did that, I really kind of looked at who I was, who I had been for the last few months trying to do this thing. What I saw, I wasn't a guy who had been dealt a bad hand. What I actually saw was a guy who had been inconsistent. who had good days and bad days, and who let his mood decide his output, who would start things and didn't finish them, who told himself stories about why today wasn't the right day to do the hard thing that needed to get done. That was a real problem, and that was the thing that I had to fix first. So here's what I decided to do. I decided to stop trying to fix the business, and I started to try to fix myself. Not because I gave up on the idea of building something online, but because I realized that the person I was right now wasn't capable of building anything that would truly last. You can't build a stable business on an unstable foundation. And I was unstable. My discipline was inconsistent. My follow through was weak. My mindset had gone from optimistic to pessimistic, and I had barely noticed it happening. So I shifted my focus completely. Instead of asking, how do I make this business work? I started asking, how do I become someone who can actually build a business or be trusted to build such a business? And so the first thing I did was make a decision about income, right? I said to myself, hey, this entrepreneurial thing is going to need to wait because I can't operate if I don't have any money to operate from. So right now, the most immediate problem that I need to solve is money. I need to make sure the bills are paid, that my parents are supported. Then I can focus properly on actually building a solid business. And so I kind of went back to actually applying for jobs. And although that felt uncomfortable at first, because part of me felt like I was kind of taking a step backward, like I was admitting defeat or something, but I reframed it for myself. I said going back to employment isn't failure. I was just solving the most urgent problem first so that I could build the rest from a stable place. Because here's what I've learned. You cannot think clearly when you're desperate, when every decision you make is colored by financial pressure and panic. When every decision you make is colored by financial pressure and panic, you make bad choices. You take shortcuts, you cut corners, you make moves based on fear instead of strategy. Getting a stable income back wasn't giving up on anything. It was the thing that actually gave me the space to actually work on myself properly. And that's when things started to change for me. Now I want to talk for a moment what taking initiative actually means, because most people misunderstand it. They think initiative means coming up with like a big idea or making a bold move, doing something dramatic. That's not what initiative really is. Real initiative is actually a bit more simpler than that. It's just doing the thing that you said you were going to do, even when you don't feel like it. It's making the decision to work on yourself before anyone around you notices you need to. That's called taking initiative. It's solving problems instead of waiting for someone else to solve them for you. And here's what that looked like for me in practice. I started with the smallest things first. And I started with the small things because the small things are what build the foundation for everything else. I started waking up at the same time every day, not because some guru told me that, oh, if you wake up earlier, you'll be more productive, but because I realized the way you start your day sets the tone for every decision you make after it. When you wake up with no structure, you move through the day reactively. Things happen to you instead of you making things happen. I started finishing what I started. Now, that sounds simple, but for a long time, I had a habit of starting things and actually not finishing them. And I'm sure many of you guys can relate to that. I made a rule for myself that if I say I'm going to do something, I do it. Not most of the time, not sometimes, every time. The integrity with yourself is the most important thing that you can build. If you keep making promises to yourself that you don't keep, you start to lose trust in yourself. And when you don't trust yourself, you stop believing that your plans are real, and you start hedging, half committing, already expecting to quit before you even start. The third thing I changed was how I talked to myself, my inner self-talk, about everything, about where I was headed. I had been running on a kind of negativity in my mind for months without even fully realizing it. I had this kind of voice in the back of my mind telling me that, hey, things were not going to work out, that I was going to fail, that I wasn't meant to do anything great, that maybe I wasn't cut off for this. And so I made a deliberate decision to start replacing that voice with a more honest one, with a more positive one. Now, I wasn't telling myself that, oh, everything is fine. But genuinely, I was just looking at the problems as things to be solved rather than signs that I was failing or that I was doing something wrong. And that shift in how I started to work changed everything about how I started to move. Now, within a few months of making those changes, things started to move and change quickly for me. Now, I want to be clear, not everything happened overnight. Not everything came together overnight. It was a lot more subtle than that. But I started landing interviews. I started to get job offers. And for the first time in a long time, I had a paycheck coming in consistently, and something interesting started to happen. When the financial pressure lifted, I started thinking more clearly. I started showing up better for my work, for my responsibilities, for my family. And I was just able to be a better son, better employee, better worker, and just even better with myself. And I also had energy left over to actually keep working on my business, on working on myself. I was no longer acting from a place of desperation. I was actually operating from a place of stability. There's a guy I know, and I won't use his name, but his situation was similar to mine. He had spent a few years bouncing between side hustles, never fully committing to any one of them, and never really getting stable or getting any traction with any of those things. He was a smart guy, capable guy, but he was scattered. And at some point, he just kind of hit a wall. His girlfriend had moved on. His parents had stopped asking about his plans because they already kind of knew the answer. And he called me one night and he said something I've never kind of forgot. He said, "Hey, I think I've been waiting for something to happen to me instead of making things happen." And that was it. That was the whole problem. He started treating his job search like a second job. He would submit applications every morning. He was on networking calls during his lunch break. He was spending evenings building a new skill set. And within 4 months, he had a new role at almost double his previous salary. But here's the thing I want you to understand. The salary wasn't the point. The point was what he became in the process of going after it. He stopped waiting and he started moving. And once you experience what that actually feels like, to actually execute on something, to set a goal and follow through on it, something changes in you permanently. You start to believe that that your decisions actually matter, that you are actually in control of your own life, of where all this goes. And that belief, that feeling is the real foundation that everything else is built on. So let me give you something practical that you can walk away with after this video, because I don't want this just to be a story about what worked for me. I want to give you something that you can actually start using this week. There are 4 things I think matter most when you're trying to turn your life around. The first is structure. Your day needs a shape around it. When you wake up with no plan, you spend your energy reacting to things instead of directing it towards something useful. It doesn't have to be complicated. Pick a time to wake up every morning and stick to it. Know the 3 most important things you need to get done that day, and make sure you know those things before you even open your phone. Build a basic routine around your morning and protect it. Structure isn't about being rigid. It's about giving yourself a track to run on so you're not starting from zero every single day. The second is follow through. Whatever you say you're going to do it. Start small if you need to. Set targets that you know you can hit, and then actually hit those targets. Because every time you follow through on something, even something small, you're building evidence for yourself that you can be trusted. And every time you don't follow through, you're building the opposite kind of evidence. This is how people end up not believing in themselves. Not from one big failure, but from 100 small ones that they let slide. The third is cutting the noise. Most people who are behind financially are also overstimulated. Social media, streaming Netflix, endless scrolling. And I'm not going to tell you like, hey, don't use your phone or delete all the apps. But I will tell you this, every hour you spend consuming other people's lives is an hour you're not building yours. You have to get honest about how much your time is going towards things that truly don't move the needle versus things that actually move you forward. The fourth thing is putting yourself around better people. And this one is uncomfortable to say, but it's true. If everyone in your immediate circle is also stuck and also not building anything great, and also just talking about what they're going to do someday, that environment is actually working against you. You don't have to abandon the people in your life, but you do need to deliberately start seeking out people who are ahead of you and trying to get around them. People who are doing the thing that you want to do, because proximity matters more than you think. It changes what you think is normal. It changes what you think is possible. It raises your standard for yourself. So those 4 things, structure, follow through, cutting through the noise, and being in a better environment, they're not glamorous, but they are the actual foundation that serious people are built on. Now let's quickly talk about the money side of things, because habits and mindset matter. But at some point, you also need to solve the actual income problem. And I want to be straightforward with you about this. Budgeting alone will not get you out of a bad spot. You can cut subscriptions, you can meal prep, you can track every dollar. But if your income is low, there's simply a ceiling on how far discipline alone will take you. The real lever is your earning capacity. And what that means is what you're able to get paid for the skills and value that you bring to the table. And this is where most people make a mistake. They focus all their energy on trying to spend less instead of figuring out ways to actually earn more. Spending less is a short-term move. Building your income capacity is a long-term strategy. So a question you need to honestly answer is, what are you worth in the job market right now? And more importantly, what could you be worth in 2 or 3 years if you move deliberately towards the right skills? Because that gap between what you earn now and what you could earn is where your real opportunity is. I went from customer service to becoming an IT project manager, and that career path took me from a modest salary to eventually making over $300,000 in a single year. And I'm not telling you that to impress you. I'm telling you that because I want you to understand that where you are right now has very little to do with where you could be if you make better decisions starting right now. The professionals I've seen change their lives fastest are not the ones who found a magic shortcut. They're the ones who identified a real skill, something that organizations actually need, something that pays well, and they got serious about building it. They treated their career development like a project deadline, not something that they'd get around to, something that they were actively working on every single week. Because here's the reality: the market rewards skill. It rewards reliability. It rewards people who show up consistently and can be trusted to deliver. And all of those things are things you can build starting right now. At whatever level you're currently at, the only question is whether you're going to. So here's what I want to leave you with. If you've been watching this video, something in it resonated with you. Maybe it was the part about waiting for the right moment. Maybe it was the part about not following through on your promises. Maybe it was just the number, less than $10,000, and knowing that it represents something that you've been avoiding directly. Whatever it was, don't let this just be another video that you watch, because that's the easiest thing to do. Just watch something. Instead, I want you to feel something, and then I want you to go back to what you were doing and reevaluate where you currently are. I'm not asking you to do something different. Tonight, I want you to sit down and answer 3 questions honestly. What is the most urgent problem in my situation right now? What have I been doing about it? And what have I been avoiding lately? What is the specific thing that I can do tomorrow that I can actually commit to that can help me move towards solving this problem? Write it down in your notes app. Not in your head, write it down on a piece of paper, because there's something about actually writing things down that will have an impact, a transformative impact on your life. I spent a long time in my life being the person who had good intentions, but inconsistent actions. And the moment I started to actually write things down and actually follow through on them, things started to change for me. So hopefully this video now has given you permission to at least go and change your circumstance. So identify what's the most important problem that you have right now, write it down, and work towards solving that. And hopefully you'll start moving towards the direction that you actually want to go in.